Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're decoding the hidden psychology behind a habit I guarantee you engage in all the time, rewatching the exact same shows over and over again. And spoiler alert, it is definitely not just a lack of imagination. It's actually a brilliant, deeply ingrained strategy for mental survival. Let's dive right in. Picture your typical evening routine. Have you ever wondered why, after a long, exhausting day, you instinctively choose to put on that exact same sitcom you've literally already seen 10 times, instead of starting something brand new? You sit down, open an app, and just completely bypass all the fresh content. You ignore that critically acclaimed drama everyone's talking about, because honestly, it just feels like homework. It's almost automatic, right? Well, your brain is actively craving a specific kind of emotional safety that new content simply cannot provide. We're all caught in this modern dilemma. On one hand, you've got the immense pressure of thousands of new shows demanding your attention. And on the other, the profound, undeniable comfort of one old favorite. It's incredibly common to feel kind of guilty or maybe even a bit lazy when picking that familiar standby over the overwhelming wave of endless streaming choices. But listen, you really shouldn't feel guilty. Your brain is actually doing something highly sophisticated here to protect your mental health. To understand why, we have to look at how our minds actually operate. Psychologists explain that we all have what's known as cognitive bandwidth. Basically, this is a strictly limited amount of mental energy available for processing new information. Every single new piece of data you encounter, whether that's learning a new character's name, following some complex plot twist, or just decoding a fresh setting, it all demands a chunk of that mental energy. And frankly, after a taxing workday, you probably just don't have any of that bandwidth left to spare. So this leads us to a highly practical coping mechanism. Think of it as a three-step process. First, there's that intense mental exhaustion from your job or social life. Second, you engage with a known show. By selecting a series where you already know literally every single line, your brain utilizes something called predictive processing to achieve step 3, which is cognitive offloading. You are officially signaling your nervous system that it's finally safe to stop working, stop analyzing, and just simply exist. You're reallocating all that energy away from processing directly into deep rest. Now, for some people, this habit is so much more than just resting. It acts as a critical safe harbor. Navigating the daily unpredictability of life takes a heavy toll, especially if you happen to have a highly sensitive nervous system. For those individuals, turning to a familiar screen isn't just entertainment. It's a vital tool for emotional regulation and bringing down that intense cognitive overload. Just think about the stark contrast here. Unpredictable real-world interactions and new environments, they cause a rapid, massive energy burn. Conversely, a familiar show offers a guaranteed recovery environment. There is zero risk of betrayal, no unexpected shifts in mood, and absolutely 100% emotional certainty. You know exactly how the story ends, which means your brain doesn't have to stay on guard at all. And this brings us to another really profound psychological layer. If you grew up in a high-pressure environment or maybe had to take on responsibilities way too early, moments of calm might actually feel suspiciously like the quiet before the storm. Your nervous system basically adapted to stay in a constant state of high alert. Well, rewatching serves as a powerful psychological signal that actively overrides that ingrained chronic stress alert. It tells your body, convincingly, that your environment is truly secure. Which brings us to the profound power of one. Finding comfort entirely within this single, controlled world grants you what researchers call survival independence. What this really means is you don't need to rely on anyone else for your emotional safety or entertainment. You've created a completely self-contained sanctuary where you can reliably find comfort and manage your own anxiety, totally independent of whatever chaotic stuff is happening in the world outside your door. Okay, this brings us to what I think is the most fascinating point, the hidden genius behind all of this behavior. We so often label rewatching as a lazy habit, right? But it actually reveals deep independence and potentially a really high IQ. What looks like stagnation from the outside is very often the hallmark of a highly intelligent, overactive mind that is actively working to manage its own internal environment. A huge part of this is having what psychologists call a high internal locus of evaluation. Choosing familiarity over whatever happens to be trending today demonstrates this trait perfectly. It proves that you confidently judge your choices by your own internal standards, rather than what the internet or society is telling you to watch. You know exactly what makes you feel whole, and you trust that internal compass way more than external hype. People with this high internal locus of evaluation share a few really distinct traits. Instead of caving to that constant, exhausting digital pressure to keep up with new releases just to fit in, they maintain a remarkably strong sense of personal identity. They deeply value their privacy and their mental space, and they completely avoid the exhausting social comparison that comes with forcing yourself to watch the latest cultural hits just to participate in the online chatter.
In fact, rewatching can be the ultimate brilliant coping strategy for a highly intelligent mind. When you have an overactive brain that is constantly feeding on information, always seeking depth, and examining every single angle of a brand new situation, well, that leads to rapid mental exhaustion. A high IQ mind deliberately uses familiar media to manage its own complexity. It's intentionally hitting pause on that endless influx of new data to prevent a total mental burnout.
So the really crucial part here is how this familiarity is utilized. The familiar show acts as this incredibly comforting, structured noise. Because your brain already knows the plot inside and out, it doesn't need to pay close attention. And this creates a safe, predictable background that allows a busy mind to finally wander, to subconsciously connect complex ideas, and to enter a state of deep creative incubation, all without any new, jarring distractions pulling it off course. So, it is officially time to let go of that guilt. You aren't being antisocial, and you certainly aren't stuck in the past. As this perspective perfectly highlights, you're simply choosing clarity over chaos and truth over trends. You're actually listening to what your nervous system genuinely needs to protect your peace in a world that literally never stops talking. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to consider tonight, right as you sink into the couch. What is your remarkable, complex mind trying to tell you the very next time you hit play on that familiar favorite? Are you craving cognitive offloading, an escape from social burnout, or maybe a quiet moment of creative incubation? Pay attention to that choice. It honestly reveals so much more about your brilliant mind than you probably ever realized.